This is A Different Perspective with Kevin Randle. A retired U.S. Lieutenant Colonel, Kevin Randle has been studying UFOs for nearly 50 years. Kevin has investigated some of the most famous UFO cases in the world and has been consulted for dozens of documentaries about UFOs. Considered one of the leading experts into the Roswell UFO crash of 1947, Kevin has written more than 25 books about UFOs, including the recently published Roswell in the 21st Century. Now, here is the host of A Different Perspective, Kevin Randle.
And welcome to this edition of A Different Perspective. I am Kevin Randle, and before I bring on my guest, Mike Rogers, I have some things on my mind that have come up in the last couple of days that have annoyed me. It's just that sometimes I get so tired because we have way too much unnecessary turmoil. As a kid, I wanted two things. I wanted to be a writer, and I wanted to be a soldier. In junior high, they had a class on journalism. I wasn't sure exactly what journalism was. I knew that it had to do with writing. And so I took the class on journalism, beginning my writing career. It's too bad that today journalism is dead. Just don't do the simple things you would expect them to do. They don't call to verify anything. They don't look anywhere other than to Twitter and social media for their stories. They do not set foot out there. They make stuff up. I don't know how many times you've seen things on TV where they claim they're in one place and they're somewhere else and they're faking where they are. In high school, I took journalism in high school as well, and I learned that the managing editor is the important position on a newspaper. We had two girls who were the editors, co-editors, and I was the managing editor of the school newspaper, and I ended up doing most of the work and setting things up, and they just kind of did whatever editors do at that level. Kind of an eye-opening thing. The problem was I had no money for college at that point, given our circumstances, but the Army was offering to make high school students helicopter pilots. You had to have a high school diploma to become a helicopter pilot. You had to take the test. You had to have a certain level of skill, a certain level of a certain IQ. You had to not be colorblind to become a helicopter pilot. And I was able to do that. So I entered the Army as a private E1. I went to flight school, graduated, was promoted to warrant officer, and sent to Vietnam immediately. Once we came back, we figured there would be a year turnaround before we had to go back to Vietnam, but Nixon got us out of that mess. And then came the RIF, a reduction in force, and they throwing out all of us that came in as temporary soldiers, I guess, during the Vietnam War. They were getting rid of us and keeping the professionals there. In college, I took writing courses, and I was writing about UFOs. And I often joke about how I paid for my college education on my Saga scholarship. Saga was a magazine that published a lot of UFO stories, and it seemed I was able to sell one to them practically every semester, and that just about covered my tuition. But while I was in college, I linked up with Bob Cornett, and we decided to write science fiction. We went to the science fiction conventions to meet the editors. And one of the people we met was a woman wanting to become an agent looking for writers, and we, of course, talked to her. And I got a call from her one day, and she said she'd talked to some publishers, and they were looking for somebody to write books about the Green Berets in Vietnam and wanted to know if I could do that. And I'm thinking, yeah, I want to write books, and I want to do that. And if you wanted me to write about nurses in hospitals, I would say, yes, I can do that too. So we did a whole bunch of books. Bob Cornett and I did a whole bunch of books on the Green Berets in Vietnam, but we also wrote some science fiction. We published the science fiction, and that was going very well. So we did the Vietnam Ground Zero series, and I also maintained my link to the military in the Iowa National Guard and then Air Force ROTC. And because I'd been a ward officer, I was appointed as opposed to commissioned. Now they commission you at CW2. But that meant I could take ROTC, and once that was over, once we graduated, I was only required to serve 90 days of active duty because I got caught in a RIF. The Air Force was reducing its force. But I maintained my interest in UFOs, and I got dragged into writing about them, and the books did well. But here's the problem. In this field, like so many others, you must toe the party line. You must embrace everything from the nonsensical cattle mutilations being alien to crop circles to just about everything. You had to follow the party line or you'd find yourself under assault. I tried to ignore the ignorance, but sometimes it gets too deep, and I've been caught up in another fight about this. Somebody wants me to apologize for something I said, and I would reinforce it because it was true, and I've been caught in a number of these things. I once said something about Stephen Greer and one of the C-SETI crashes, and I got emails and emails and emails from those people saying I was wrong, and of course I knew what I was talking about. So I just decided to ignore the nonsense because it was coming from a position of ignorance. It's just too many distractions. And so instead, I'm going to pursue which interests me, and I hope what interests you is the audience. And with that said, I'm going to bring on Mike Rogers of the Travis Walton abduction. Mike Rogers worked in logging for much of his life, even summers when he was in school. He was 28 when he had his own crew. In 1975, he had a 6-man crew, of which Travis Walton was a sawyer, or a sawyer, like in Tom Sawyer. I digressed there for some bizarre reason. A year after the well-known encounter and Walton's apparent abduction, he started working with his father again and went back to school for a time. And in 1997, he was a witness to the Phoenix Lights. But I think we're going to talk a little bit about the Walton abduction and everything that's been going on about that in the last 3 or 4 months. Mike Rogers, welcome again to A Different Perspective.
Hello, Kevin. Glad to be here.
Even after my long, involved rant.
Well, you got to say what you got to say.
Oh, sometimes you just... The line from... Body heat. Sometimes it's just coming down so heavy you need to wear a hat. I won't say what's coming down so heavy because, it's a family radio show. Let's talk Travis Walton and the abduction. And I think the best way to do that is start when you guys were leaving, I guess, the area in the evening, having completed the work, and you witnessed some kind. Tell us the story. Tell us how you saw the object, what was going on.
Yeah, well, I've only told this about 1,000 times, I guess. I guess I can do it again.
Well, then you probably know it very well.
Oh, yeah. I try not to be repetitive, I try to make it a little different, but it doesn't really work because I've used all the words, Anyway.
Well, I'm just assuming that a lot of the audience is familiar with the Walton abduction story. Of course, you are, and I am. Yeah. So it helps to give them kind of a different perspective.
Well, to go through it pretty quick, I was the crew boss with my truck, international crew cab. Anyway, we worked until right up until sundown. Actually, past sundown a bit that night because. I had this contract with the Forest Service, and we were actually doing 3 separate contracts at the same time, but I won't get involved with that. But anyway, I had 6 guys working for me: Travis, Ken Peterson, Alan Dallas, Steve Pierce, John Gillette, and a really tall guy named Dwayne Smith. 2 of those are deceased now. That's Alan Dallas and Dwayne Smith. But on that particular night, we loaded up and headed out of there after sunset, way after sunset. Actually, it was almost dark. Actually, I remember seeing the sliver moon off over in the western sky, almost ready to set. Anyway, once we headed down that road. Everybody was tired. It had been an awful long day. I think we worked about 10 or 11 hours that day and 2 lunch breaks, but went down that road, actually up the road because it was an incline up, steadily up till we went to the top of the rim, what they call a Mogollon rim of Arizona. And We rounded a thicket of trees, big trees and small trees, where you couldn't see much of anything. Of course, up until that point, we'd been seeing a flicker of light off in the distance here and there. And as we got closer, it became more vivid. But we rounded a corner and broke into a clearing. And when we did, Travis yelled out, "Stop the truck," which I did. But at that point, this thing was off to the right, almost straight to my right, and it was up the hill, so I couldn't see it. Everybody else was looking at it, but I couldn't see it. So I turned the truck off. Well, Travis had jumped out of the truck, I guess, even before I got the truck stopped. And he started walking up towards this thing. I had to lean over, kind of into Ken Peterson's lap, you might say, in order to see this thing. And when I did, I was awestruck. It was the first thing that hit me was it was beautiful. It was aesthetically perfect, and it shone from within, and it was also reflective of the surroundings on the outside. Travis, of course, got a much closer view. And of course, he says that the surface of it was like glass.
Well, what was the shape of the object? What exactly did it look like?
Well, I've drawn pictures of it, several actually.
Which I will put up on my blog so people can take a look at it.
Okay, yeah. Anyway, it looked just like that picture. Anyway, pretty much. Anyway, there's no way I could ever achieve the perfection or the actual reality of it, But anyway, Travis, by the time he got up to it, and he started out sort of almost running, not really, just like a fast walk, and then he slowed down till he was just taking very slow steps, the last 2 or 3 steps, but he got up as close as he could underneath it, because there was a pile of logging debris which cats had pushed up, dozers.
I was going to say,
yeah, cats aren't quite that strong. Anyway, they'd pushed up a pile of debris there. It was just logging debris, you might say, small pieces, large pieces, and so on. And Travis got up right there to that pile of debris, and he was standing there looking up at it. And, when I leaned over and looked at it, like I said, I was awestruck, and it was beautiful. I mean, in fact, most of the other guys who have described it that way.
So everybody in the truck got a good look at the object then?
Yeah. I think Dwayne Smith might have been a little bit impaired in his vision because he was sitting behind me, and there was 4 guys in the back seat. He was like directly behind me on the passenger side behind me. Anyway, he did get a look at it, of course, but I think his vision was a little impaired because he had to look through the truck and the 3 guys in front of him. But anyway, yeah, he did get a good look at it, a fairly good look at it. The thing that struck everybody right there very, very quickly was that this thing, once Travis got up there to it, it started moving a little, and it was making a noise you could hear. Hard to describe, impossible to describe.
Well, let's stop there. Let's stop there because I got to take a break here real quick.
Okay, all right.
Before we go away, I'd like to say that my latest book, UFOs in the Deep State, is available on Amazon. If you get a chance, take a look at it. If you like it, give it a rating. I think it's appropriate for today's environment when we're talking an awful lot about the deep state and how it affects other aspects of our life. You are listening to A Different Perspective on the X-Zone Broadcast Network, and we'll be back right after this, so please stick around. I am here with Mike Rogers. Well, I shouldn't say I'm here. We're practicing social distancing. He is in the Southwest. I am in the Midwest. And the studio is in Canada. Isn't that exciting? We're not close enough to infect one another. And all our governments can be happy for us. When we went away, Mike, you were talking about, I guess you didn't hear a sound from this object. Travis had walked up toward it. The guys in the truck were trying to see it. What happens next?
Well, right about that time, I mean, when the objects, the noise got louder, and eventually there was a rumble to it that I could feel through the wheel of the truck, the steering wheel, and at that point, Travis looked as though he was getting frightened himself. He kind of crouched down behind a log that was sticking out from the slash pile I talked about, and he looked, he glanced back over towards the truck, which was, about, actually we measured it one time. It was 93 feet from the center of the truck to the approximate place where he stood. Anyway, I measured it. I've been back to that site numerous times. In fact, this year, I've been there 3 times, all within a 2-week period too, or excuse me, a 3-week period. But anyway, he stood up, okay, and kind of in a turning sort of way, like as if he was turning to leave to go back to the truck. And at that moment, something hit him. But see, I had looked away because I was getting very apprehensive. I knew something was going to happen. Everybody could feel it. Something was going to happen. I mean, it was building up. It was like this thing was just producing a feeling in us that was like something's going to happen. That's the best way I can describe it. I had turned away to start the truck, and I did. But when I did so, the whole woods out in front of me lit up a brilliant blue-green color, and everybody describes that same thing. It was brighter than day. I mean, it lit up the woods, out in front of me, just brighter than day. Really, it was blinding. Anyway, I started the truck, and I glanced back over towards Travis's direction, and he was flying through the air. He actually was up off the ground. In other words, like a hand grenade had gone off in front of him. And of course, I've never seen that happen in real life, but that's just what I used to describe it. Anyway, he hit the ground. I saw him hit the ground, and he hit the ground flat on his back, and he didn't move. And of course, guys in the back of the truck, I particularly remember Alan Dallas screaming at me to get the hell out of there. And so I waited, I don't know, 3 or 4 seconds, because I just didn't feel like we should leave at the moment. But everybody was yelling at me, and it was very frightening, and I very quickly became panicky. I hit the gas and took off down that road real fast, much faster than I should have, because I messed up the truck. I remember hitting the tree, breaking one of the mirrors off. We went down the road very quickly for about somewhere between 1/8 and 1/4 of a mile. That part I've never measured, but that's what it seemed like. And at that point, I stopped the truck because I realized that we had left him back there, and we didn't know what happened to him. So, and the first thing I did is get out of the truck, and the other guys start getting out. And I looked back that direction. Of course, it was through the woods, was pretty thick by that time, and you couldn't see the thing, but I saw, and a couple of other guys saw. I remember Steve Pierce and John Gillette remember seeing this thing, a light. He said, just a light through the trees. It lifted up, and streaked away towards the northeast. And nevertheless, not everybody in the truck saw it.
Well, so you're standing, you've stopped the truck. You're an eighth of a mile to quarter mile away from where Travis is now laying in the forest.
Right.
And you've seen the object or the light or whatever it is take off to the north.
Right. Anyway, everybody eventually got out very quickly, actually, and everybody went around to the front of the truck in the headlights. It just seemed to be the thing to do. I don't think anybody thought about it, but that's what we did. And everybody was just commotion. I mean, it was hectic. It was everybody just jabbering away. Nobody was listening to anybody, and nobody was. I think there was only one person there, Steve Pierce. He was out there, but he wasn't saying anything. He looked like he was in shock. And anyway.
Well, let me ask you a question which you may not have been asked before. Do you have any firearms with you?
No, I've never carried. I didn't have. We had a flashlight. That was about the only weapon we had besides chainsaws. But,
Well, I was thinking about snakes and things like that.
Snakes?
Mm-hmm.
Well, yeah, we've had some encounters with a few things out in the woods like snakes, but. Nobody had that. Nobody's thinking about that at the time. I didn't have any weapon. Nobody did. Nobody did. But I will say this: when I told everybody we got to go back, they didn't want to, and so I said, okay, what should we do? And we looked up there. We were only, I don't know, an eighth of a mile, you might say, from what they call the rim road. Now that's the top of the ridge, the very top of the rim, the Mogollon Rim. And there were somebody in a pickup, you could see their lights going by, and of course it was hunting season. We'd heard shots during the day periodically. Not a lot of them, but 2 or 3 times we'd heard shots off in the distance. And somebody there said, "Look, let's chase those guys down. They got guns." I think it was Alan Dallas said that. Anyway, so I said, okay. So we pulled out onto it was kind of an S thing there. We pulled out onto the rim road and went down the rim road a short ways. And I said, no. I says, this is stupid. I says, we got to go back. So I turned the truck around right there, and we went back, but very slowly, very much slow compared to heading out of there. Anyway, all those guys went with me, and that was very different from the movie, which shows me going back by myself, and I don't know why they did that, but that's the way it was. Anyway, we all went back, and we got back to the spot, and I knew the spot. It was very recognizable. I pulled the truck up into this clearing as much as I could, kept the headlights on, and we all got out. All of us.
About how much time had passed?
Oh gosh, I don't remember. 15 minutes at the most. From the time we left the spot until we come back to it. Anyway, of course, pulling the truck up in that clearing to where we shone the lights on it. Of course, I couldn't shine it where Travis had been, just there by the road, close to the road. Anyway, we all got out, and we started, like I say, we had a flashlight in the glove box, and I think Ken got it out, and we started walking up around through the clearing, and everybody was just scared as hell, I can tell you that. And first thing, of course, we noticed was that Travis wasn't there. And we walked around through the clearing first, kind of circled around, and then we circled around a much bigger circle out among the trees and stuff around the clearing. And finally, it was kind of getting emotional for all of us, and especially me, and I broke down, and I actually went to my knees, and And I, I admit that I cried. Okay. A lot of people since then, when they hear this, they assume that I was crying because I was scared. It wasn't that. It was more relief that we didn't find him. Because when we pulled up in that clearing, I was expecting to find a charred body, Travis dead laying there somewhere, and we didn't find that. And so that was a big relief to me. And that was partly why I was crying, okay? But it was just emotionally very impactful. And of course, then we all got back in the truck and slowly headed back into Heber, which is the town nearest where this occurred. And upon getting back into Heber, I told Ken, he was sitting to my right. He had always been sitting to my right because it was me driving, Ken Peterson, then Alan, and then Travis sitting on the passenger seat in the front seat. And everybody maintained their original positions. Nobody got in the front seat with Ken. And I told Ken, I said, man, I can't. I said, we need. Ken kept. We're talking about this on the way in, and I told Ken once we got into Heber, I says, I can't call. I says, I just can't do it. And he said, okay, I'll do it. And so he did. Ken Peterson got out and he called the local authorities. I don't know what he did or who he called, but a Deputy Ellison came out and talked to us first, and then eventually, I don't know.
What would you say about that? I mean, how do you have a clue as to what he said to the police about this?
Oh, I could hear what he was saying because it was one of these phone booths that it wasn't a box. It was like on the wall of a building. It had a cover over the top of it, but it was like open otherwise, and it was, in fact, the building it was on was a telephone building. Okay, it's not there anymore. None of that's there right now. But
what was he saying to the police?
I could barely hear what he was saying, but I couldn't. I was like too rattled to really pay attention. But whatever he did, like I say, Chuck Ellison, who's a deputy there in Heber, came out, and he was there just within like 10 minutes. And we told the story to him. I was very reluctant to include the word UFO or anything about that because I just had this feeling that the authorities were going to take it wrong, and of course they did. Once Sheriff Gillespie and a guy named Ken Copeland came out, Ken Copeland was extremely negative. He was skeptical, and it showed. Just the things he said and his mannerisms and whatnot. But of course, Sheriff Gillespie was calm and he was very professional, and he would just ask questions and took it all in. He took it all in. Nobody was writing any notes at this point. They were just listening, and we told them about it. Somebody eventually told them about a UFO, and once they did, of course, I went ahead and told them that Travis was missing and what had happened. And
I think this was a good place to take a break because we got Travis missing. We have the law enforcement people there. I'm sure you're about to go out on a search and all that sort of thing, and we can cover that when we come back, I think.
All right.
I'm here with Mike Rogers. We're talking about the Travis Walton abduction. We're getting kind of a detailed description of it, which I think we need to understand exactly what's going on. And later on, we'll get into some other details and some other questions about that. I would also like to remind you that our many fine programs on the X-Zone Broadcast Network can be found at xzbn.net. Last week, I screwed that up for some reason. I don't know why. Take a look at that, and we will be back right after this, so please stick around. We are back, Mike Rogers and I. We're talking about the Walton abduction, and we reached a point where law enforcement is now involved. Travis Walton is missing, and the guys in the pickup truck are trying to convince, I guess, the police that something untoward has happened to their friend Travis Walton, and they didn't have a hand in it. So, Mike, the police were there. I believe you're about to go back out to the, dare I say, scene of the crime, out to the location where the event took place. So take it away from there.
Scene of the crime. All right. Yeah. Right there that very evening, just as soon as we'd told everything to Sheriff Gillespie and them, and Ellison and Copeland, all three of them, and myself and two other guys, I can't remember exactly who it was. I think it was Ken Peterson and Alan Dallas. But anyway, we went back up the hill, and they had two vehicles. They had a brown car, and they had a four-wheel drive something or other. I wasn't really paying attention to make and model. I do pay attention to color, but anyway, we went back up there, and I was riding with them in their 4x4 vehicle, and I remember Ken Copeland was driving that 4x4 vehicle. I think Ellison was in the car, but anyway, we drove down that main road and then down the logging road we were on when it happened, and went way on down the hill past that, and turned around, came back up. But I can't remember where all we searched exactly, because that was like 46 years ago. Anyway.
Well, you were doing the search in the vehicles. Did you get out and walk around at all, or anything like that?
No, I didn't. Ken Copeland got out a couple of times and checked the ground, and he had a flashlight, and he thought of himself as a tremendous tracker. I remember that, saying, "I'm the best tracker." That Navajo County. But anyway,
what time of day was this? I mean, you said it was about.
Oh yeah, well, by the time we got into Hebrew to talk to the authorities, it was already dark. I mean, it was totally dark, and the moon had gone down. So I mean, it was pitch black. So when we got back out to the site, I mean, it was really dark. I mean, it was just as dark as it can get, actually. And up there in the forest, it can get pretty dark. In fact, it's so dark that the stars are the light, which they do provide some light, because up there at that altitude, the stars shine rather brightly. But anyway, eventually, they had done all the searching they wanted, and Ken Copeland and I headed back down. The other guys got in the car and went with Ellison. Ken Copeland and I went looking for Mary Kellett, which is Travis's mother, and I knew where she lived. And of course, we very quickly found her. Travis's mother lives something like 12 miles east of the site where this happened. And we got there, and I knocked on the door and woke her up. She apparently was already in bed, Of course, she would by then, because it was, like 10 or 11 o'clock at night by this time. And proceeded to tell Mary Kellett about what had happened. And Mary Kellett was, she was having a hard time taking it all in. I mean, she had just woke up, and she just didn't seem to be all there. And she was acting sleepy and stunned. And anyway, Ken Copeland remembers it rather differently than it really was. Of course, he's a skeptic. He's always been a skeptic. And so he told a different story, and I've always said no. Like on Larry King Live, I was saying Mary Kellett was a very, strong woman. She was out there by herself. Travis said that too on Larry King Live, that his mother was a very strong woman. She was out there by herself. She had raised, I can't remember how many kids on her own. And she wasn't. Travis said she wasn't somebody who would just break down, over hearing something like that, and that's exactly the way it was.
Well, at this point, Travis is only missing. You don't know what's
Oh
happening.
yeah. We had no
It's not
idea
like, well,
what
we've got
happened.
the body out in the car or something like that.
No, no. Matter of fact, people have been saying all along. I mean, for years, all these years, uh, that we all witnessed Travis being abducted. That is absolutely untrue. They just assume this because that's what they want it to be. We did not see him get abducted. In fact, we didn't see a damn thing of Travis after I drove off in panic. After I hit the gas and left, we didn't see anything after that.
So
And so
what you're saying is you guys all saw the UFO, saw the object in the sky,
that's right. We heard it. We saw it. It was very striking. It was extremely
and
real. But
everybody about you apparently saw some kind of beam strike Travis.
yes, uh-huh.
And
Well, I didn't see like I say, I didn't actually see him getting hit by this beam. I go by what some of the other guys said
well, that was my
about.
point. You didn't see him get struck. You saw him in the air as he
Yeah, I saw him
sort
flying
of
back.
fell.
Right. Yeah.
But the
Uh-huh.
other guys all saw him being struck by the beam.
Most of them. I don't think Alan Dallas did. In fact, Steve Pierce was sitting right next to him. Alan Dallas was on the passenger side in the back seat, and Steve says he was hugging the floorboards. That's the way he put it. And I remember looking back there a couple of times, and Alan didn't seem to be there. I was thinking for a second that he got out himself, but he didn't. He was just hiding literally on the floorboards, or at least as close as he could get to him.
Well, wasn't there some animosity between Travis and Alan Dallas?
Yeah, there was. They had scuffled in the past. What's funny is that a couple of weeks prior to that, I had basically kicked Alan's ass over another issue entirely. Alan was kind of a hothead. He was ready to fight people. Him and Travis always had this animosity between them. And on that particular day, Travis says that Alan dropped a tree almost as if to deliberately hit him. And of course, Alan doesn't really say much. I don't remember Alan saying anything in response to that. Of course, you wouldn't expect him to, but that's what Travis says. And of course, all that's displayed in the movie.
Well, here's a question. So you've got the police involved. Travis is missing, and did they take you all into the police station to kind of question you about what really had happened out there and suggest maybe it was something not paranormal?
No. Ken Copeland eventually took me home. Okay, and that was the first time I'd to tell my wife. Her name was Katie. Tell her about it, and she had a little bit of trouble believing it, of course, but I was tired. I just went to bed. And of course, I didn't sleep very long. When I did get up, the guys that we left in Heber had driven my truck home, and I don't know what they did after that. Walked home or did something. A couple of the guys were actually staying there. Dwayne Smith and I think it was John Gillette were actually staying upstairs in my house, and so they, all I know is that when I got home, my truck was there. I went to bed. So the next morning early, I got up and I headed right back out to Heber. And when I got out there, they were already searching. I mean, there was a group of vehicles and stuff there at a gas station right there when you first come into Heber. And so I got with them and went out there. When we got out there, there's already a bunch of people out there. There's men on horseback and people searching. And so the guys that I went with or followed or whatever were kind of like the tail end of the group, that was going out to search. But I spent that day and the next day out there at the site, not really out searching with anybody, but pretty much staying close to the center where Sheriff Gillespie spent most of his time. And of course, Ken Copeland was always saying skeptical stuff to us, you know.
Well, when did it become sort of the theory that you guys had done away with Travis Walton?
I didn't hear about that until Sunday afternoon.
And that's how many days later?
That's like on the fourth day. See, this occurred Wednesday evening, and the search involved was Thursday, Friday, Saturday, and then eventually Sunday. But it didn't last all day Sunday. It was like just the morning of Sunday. The afternoon of Sunday, I was home, and I don't think it was. No, it wasn't Sheriff Gillespie. It was one of the other guys there. Maybe it was Sanford Flake there in Snowflake, who came to my house and told me that they wanted us to take part in a polygraph test, and that's the first time I'd heard of that. Very quickly, we all got together. Didn't know where Alan Dallas was. Actually, in the movie, it says it shows me and Ken Peterson talking about it, and then going out and finding Alan Dallas. No, that didn't happen. The guy, I think it was Sank Flake, call him Sank. His name was actually Sanford. Okay, but he had told me about this, and so I just went on that, and he told me that all the other guys are being informed. So I went on that, and
so everybody else was being informed. They wanted you to take polygraph examinations.
Right, exactly. So on a Monday morning, at the appropriate time, or within a few minutes thereof, everybody was there in front of the county courthouse at the time, and when, a very hectic situation. Didn't know what was going on. Didn't know what to expect. But I was there. The other guys were there, and
except for Alan Dallas.
No, Alan Dallas was there.
Okay.
Well, they were all there. I mean, like I say, I didn't notify anybody myself. That was done by the authorities. But we were all there on a Monday morning. It was like 8 o'clock or something like that. And then we met this guy named Cy Gilson. I mean, first thing, Sheriff Gillespie was there, Cy Gilson was there, and
Gilson was the polygrapher.
Cy Gilson, Cyrus Gilson was his name. Call him Cy Gilson.
Okay.
He was the polygraph examiner, and he was very skeptical. I mean, extremely skeptical. I remember at one point he walked over to me and snapped me on the back of the shoulder very hard and said, and he would do it. He'd pop me on the shoulder right at the second and say, "You aren't lying, are you?" Up, and he did that a couple of times, and I remember that very vividly.
But they all thought they now everybody knew about the UFO, right? At this point,
nobody knew anything about the UFO except for seeing it. We didn't know anything about Travis.
I'm saying the law enforcement people you talked to knew about the UFO because they talked about it the first night.
Oh yeah, you bet. I mean, by this time, the news knew about it. In fact, by this time, the whole world knew about it. I don't know how, but they did. Because
let me stop you there. We'll get back to the polygraph and what happened in that, and the rest of it here in just a moment. But I've got to take a break.
Okay.
I don't want to take a break. I have to. I'm ordered to do that.
All right, go for it.
Well, thank you. Thank you very much. I would like to point out that Roswell in the 21st Century is still available. I think it's a good resource book for those who are interested in the Roswell UFO crash. It's available on Amazon. The price has been cut, so take a quick look at that. And remember, there are good programs on the X-Zone Broadcast Network at xzbn.net. Take a look and you'll find something I'm sure that will delight you. My favorite program happens to be this one. We will be back right after this, so please stick around. joined by Mike Rogers of Travis Walton Abduction fame. And before I bring Mike back on, I'd like to say my really favorite program on the X Zone Broadcast Network is The X Zone, with Rob McConnell as the host. That should get me out of trouble for a moment anyway.
It didn't.
When we went away, Mike Rogers was about to take a polygraph examination. So, Mike, you're about to take a polygraph examination.
Yep.
The polygraph operator doesn't believe you guys in the UFO story. So take it away from there.
Yeah, well, I was all wired up. No, actually, I didn't. I was. I think there was one person that went after me. I was like fifth to be tested. I know that Steve Pierce was the very first, and Cy Gilson has said a number of times that that was because he was the youngest member of the group, and he thought if anybody would crack, it would be the youngest guy in the crew. But after testing Steve, he had a little different opinion. Apparently, I didn't see it, but Steve expressed that, and very quickly they had Steve go out in this retainment yard, which had a rock wall and barbed wire on the top. It's just basically a prison yard, which is exactly what it was. And there was a basketball hoop there, and they had a basketball and stuff, and he had to stay out there by himself for a while. In fact, they did that to each of us. I don't remember who was next or whatever. I just remember I was like fifth, and I think Dwayne Smith was the last one who were tested. But in the end, which took all day long, up until the night, actually, it was way after dark when it was all done, and once we were done, I immediately headed to talk to Cy Gilson. And he was there rolling up his wires at first, and that he didn't want to talk to me, so I waited around, and then he took his machines and his stuff and whatnot, and he headed down the stairs, and I said, "Hey, what is the deal? What's happened?" He said, "We don't normally discuss these things until it's all complete." And I says, "Well, what you got to tell us something. What happened?" And he says, "Well, one of the guys, incomplete, Alan Dallas." And I said, "Well, what about, the rest of us?" And he said, I have to admit," he says, "I have to get this checked out first. We don't normally just announce this right off." But he says, "From what it appears to me," he says, "it looks like you all passed." And,
so you passed the test. It's been several days now. The police think you've murdered Travis. And that's
up until then, yeah.
Well, until this point, when does Travis reappear?
He appeared sometime that night after the test, several hours later. The timing on that is kind of odd. It's like the aliens knew what was going on. They were fully aware of it, and so they were going to return him once that was concluded. Now, I have no idea why that timing was as such, but Travis was returned just hours after the polygraph tests were concluded. And of course, I didn't know about that, and nobody did until like the next day. In fact, it was like the evening of the next day when I got word from somebody, another authority. Somebody came and told me to my door, told me that Travis was back. And of course, I don't know. So within a few minutes of that, I was able to make contact with Travis's brother, Dwayne, and he told me that Travis was there at his house in Glendale, Arizona. And so I made, I had two vehicles at the time. I had a Dodge Charger and this work truck. But the following day, of course, I headed down to Phoenix, to Glendale, to Travis's brother's house, which I'd been at before, so I knew where it was. But I met Travis there finally, and he Travis was just kind of in a daze. He didn't say much. Couldn't get much out of him. I talked quite a bit to Dwayne, and Dwayne is the one that really told me the story, not from Travis, but from his brother Dwayne.
When did Jim and Cora Lorenzen from the Aerial Phenomena Research Organization get involved?
Somewhere in there. I don't know. I didn't know anything about that. Now, the first time I met Coral and Jim Lorenzen was in Tucson. They had asked Travis and I to come down and have a dinner there, which we did. And my memory of that was pretty clear. I remember one thing, that Coral Lorenzen was a cat and dog advocate, you might say. She belonged to an organization that didn't they supported animals' rights, you might say. And then we were having the steak dinner. So in the middle of the dinner, I said, okay, you don't believe in cruelty to animals, but yet we're eating beefsteak. I don't quite understand that. Cora wouldn't speak to me again after that. So anyway.
Way to go. Alienate everybody you can.
Yeah, alienate. Yep. Yep.
So,
I seem to be good at that.
So the Lorenzens, I guess, arranged for a lie detector test for Travis Walton to take now, to talk about what happened to him. The lie detector test you guys took was more oriented toward finding out whether or not you'd committed a crime, killed Travis or something like that.
Yeah, well, in there somewhere, I don't know who it was, but Travis was asked to take a test. I think he took a test in California prior to that, and I asked Jim Lorenzen about that. In fact, he's the one that told me about it, and I asked him about it, and all he said was, well, it was just too early for a polygraph test to mean anything. So I don't know what that meant. But anyway, within a few days, Travis took another test by somebody's urging, I don't know who, but a guy named Jack McCarthy. And according to Jack McCarthy, Travis flunked that test all the way. I mean, everything, according to him. Now,
well, let me get this straight, because I always knew there was an earlier test that Travis flunked, and it was arranged by APRO. And now you're saying there was actually
well, maybe this one in California is the one they're talking about that flunked, but this one that with McCarthy, that was afterwards. I don't know exactly. I don't write any of these things down. I'm just remembering these names. And then, of course, APRO also sponsored one with an examiner by the name of Pfeiffer, and Travis apparently passed that test. And then later on, in '93, Travis and I and Alan Dallas took another test with Cy Gilson, and we all passed that test. And then, of course, later on down the road, which was, I don't know, like 6 or 7 years ago, Travis was on that program, Moment of Truth, I think is what they called it, and in which he flunked the last question. And Ken Peterson was on that. But that's one of those things that Travis didn't want me on.
Wait a minute. Travis flunked the last question, but what was the last question?
Were you really abducted by a UFO on November 5th, 1975?
Okay, so let's recap here, because I'm going to run out of time. We know Travis took one lie detector test early on that he flunked. He may have taken a one in California that we now don't know a thing about. And you may have confused a couple of points there.
Yeah, I could have.
He took another polygraph that was arranged by the Lorenzens that he passed. Yeah. He took one, I think, arranged by a guy named Jerry Black in the 1990s, which he passed.
Yeah.
And then we get to this TV program in the 2000s at some point, and he flunked the last question, which were you abducted by a UFO? So he flunked it.
Yeah. So I hear. You see, that's all hearsay, because In fact, coming from me, it's like secondhand hearsay because it's just what I've heard on all these things. I did not do that program with Travis. Ken Peterson did. My sister Dana, who has always been married to Travis since they were married anyway. She was there, and so most of that first came from Ken Peterson. He's always been very close to me, and I will say this though: at the present moment, Travis only has one positive witness remaining, and that's John Gillette.
What about Steve Pierce?
Steve Pierce no longer wants anything to do with it. Ken Peterson no longer wants anything to do with it. I'm reluctant because several things have happened. Yeah.
I met Steve Pierce in Roswell a number of years ago.
Okay. Yeah, I remember that.
So he was talking about the abduction and Philip Klass's involvement and that sort of thing.
Right.
Philip Klass attempted to bribe him, I guess would be the right word.
$10,000 bribe. Yeah, that's right.
Which he talked about taking and then decided not to because pressure was applied to him from the other side. If you do that, we'll never talk to you again type thing.
Well, yeah, basically. Nobody ever heard him. Nobody ever twisted his arm.
Well, telling him that you won't be friends anymore, or something like that. From what Steve Pierce told me, that can be quite a bit of pressure on someone.
I told him on the phone. Okay, Steve Pierce, when he called me, I says, well, if you take that money, you'll be bruised and you'll spend the money alone. That's what I told him.
You'll be bruised. Were you suggesting he would be?
Yeah, I wasn't specific. That's all I said. You'll be bruised and you'll spend the money alone.
Well, that sounds pretty much like a threat, Mike.
Well, it kind of is. But I said, nobody ever, he was on the phone. I don't even know where he was. He was in somewhere. I don't know where he was. He just had called.
Well, my point simply is this. Pressure was put onto it by Philip Klass offering here's $10,000, and pressure was put on him from the other side. Well, if you do that, you'll be bruised and you'll spend the money alone type thing. So, he was getting pressure from both sides.
Right. Yep. Well, the thing of it is that Steve Pierce knew that he would have to pass the polygraph test to it being a hoax, which, of course, he knew he couldn't do because it really happened. So he was really in a bind there. He wanted that $10,000 very bad. In fact, I've talked to him about it recently. He definitely wanted that money. That $10,000 back at the time was like maybe $25,000 or $30,000 now. So it was very significant. He was broke. He was dirt poor, worse than dirt poor.
Let me interrupt you here because we're getting to the end of the program. I got to wrap it up here. We'll have you back next week, of course. And we'll look into some of the controversy around it and the latest investigations going on into the Walton abduction and what's being found out there and what people are saying and how all this comes to play. We have to remember this has been decades ago that the abduction took place, and we've been dealing with it for, well, again, literally decades, and see where we are in today's environment. Mike, we'll have you back next week to talk about this. And I certainly appreciate you taking time to give us in great detail what happened there back in 1975 and that sort of thing. Before we go away, please take a look at my blog. I don't know why I haven't mentioned it to this point, www.kevinrandle.blogspot.com. With Mike's permission, I will put up a picture of the UFO on my blog so y'all can see what it looked like. Mike is a very accomplished artist. He's very, very, very talented in that respect.
Thank you.
As I say, I'll be back next week with Mike Rogers. We'll continue our discussion about the Travis Walton abduction. You have been listening to A Different Perspective on the X-Zone Broadcast Network. Please come back next week and hear the conclusion of this two-parter. Thank you for listening.
Thank you, Kevin.